Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Our guest in this episode was brought to my attention as a musician. Like many other artists in this community, he has had a long history of performing and working on his own music, and we'll talk about that. But he has another passion, a passion that began after watching a particular film. For over a decade, he has focused on enlisting help from various segments of the community in the fight against sex trafficking. In this conversation, I explore those twin passions with my guest, Doug Vander Horden. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Let's remind the folks listening today that this particular episode is being recorded in early February 2023. And there are a couple of passions that you have that I'd like to explore in our conversation today.
Absolutely.
One of them is your ongoing efforts to increase awareness about human trafficking.
Yes.
And the other is making music.
Those are the two biggies.
So we are going to start with music way back
Okay.
when.
Way back.
You were in the military.
I was, yeah.
At one particular point, and you were a drummer in the military?
Yeah, drummer / percussionist, yeah.
And you played with whom?
Well, when I got in, I went to the School of Music up in Borden, CFB Borden, for 2 years. That was like 89, 90. My first posting after that was to the Navy Band in Halifax. So that's the Staticona Band. And there for a couple of years. And kind of a different story, my father as well, professional musician, was the director of music of the Vimy Band here in Kingston at the same time. And so I'm down in Halifax, settling in, newly married, getting my feet wet down there. And 2 years in, I hear that he's being posted to Halifax from here. And, he wasn't my immediate supervisor, and there's nothing in the books that said we couldn't work together. But in all their wisdom, in the ivory tower, they decided, you know what, let's not open up that, can of worms, so we're going to flip you guys. So I have my marching orders. I'm on my way to Vimy, and he's going to come down to Kingston, or to Halifax. But what was really cool was he had a tour of Europe lined up. They're shutting down the bands or the bases in Lahr and Baden, and he was short a percussionist. So he pulled a few strings and had me come up with my wife maybe a month or so early. So we got to tour Europe together with the band, and then do a recording up in Ottawa. So I was able to work with him, which was really amazing. Great guy, great musician, and so that was cool. But that brought me to Kingston, my wife and I. So we were here with Vimy for a couple years, and then they did massive reduction in the military. So it's called the Forced Reduction Plan in '94, and they cut our branch like in half. And given my instrument as a percussionist and the time in, I was right on that line. Some of the guys I went to the school with who were drummers, they fell on the good side of that line, and I happened to fall on the not so good. So I would say, you know what? You can either remuster and become an infantry soldier, and we'll hand in your drumsticks for a weapon. And I'm like, I don't think so. So I took the nice little package, and my wife is from Kingston, so we just decided, you know what, let's settle in Kingston. So we've been here since '93, and my military days came to an abrupt end 6 years in, and and here we are.
So you weren't with a marching band, you were with a band that basically stayed still and played for a group of people.
Well, it was everything. So anything. I mean, the music branch really is a public relations, tool, right? So we did, a real diverse bunch of stuff. I mean, we would do the military stuff, the marching around, the parade squares and changing command parades, and we'd be doing mess dinners, up on the base, and we'd just sit down and just doing dinner music. we did, my favorite was a lot of this in Halifax, more so than Kingston, but like high school tours or university tours. So we'd travel around Ontario, Quebec, and we do high school concerts, basically promoting the Canadian Armed Forces, and with an emphasis on the music side of it.
Right.
So we did a lot of those kind of functions, which is pretty cool. A lot of like just pop music and anything that's current of the day, just, arrange it for full band kind of arrangements and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun, We did the whole thing. So I'd be out there with my snare drum or bass drum, doing all that stuff, marching troops around in the pouring rain or whatever it may be, Remembrance Day ceremonies, all that stuff. Those were like, every year we're doing that stuff. And then the fun stuff, which was, the high school shows and, just doing music that was a little more contemporary and just popular for the day.
Now, was music a part of your life as you were growing up as a teenager? I know your dad was part of the military, but were you actually involved in music before you joined the military?
Yeah, well, you know what? Music was around my whole life. And my dad's a trombone player. And so I had a brass instrument kind of put in my face right from as old as I can hold one. And we grew up in the Salvation Army too, which is major brass banding, right? So I had a trumpet in my face before I ever had sticks in my hand. But the reality was, I'm doing Kiwanis Festival, stuff with my trumpet playing and, lessons every week and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But the whole time I'm I got little pencils in my hand and I'm hitting. I remember this favorite rocking chair, so old, and just the way the springs in it, cool sounds as you hit it. And I just, all my hours were just spent hitting things, and I think it was when I was 12, I think they finally said, you know what, this isn't going away. Like, we'll keep the trumpet playing going, but let's go buy him a snare drum, And again, my dad we were in Ottawa at this point, and he's with the Central Band, the Canadian Armed Forces, and he twisted the drummer's arm to come in and start giving me a few lessons on just snare drum. He said, if this goes well, then we'll look at the rest of it, And it did, and I got my first drum set when I was, 12. And, I never looked back. So, every day after school, I'm in there making all kinds of noise, driving my neighbors crazy. And I'm sure my parents are going, what have we done? But it was a passion, hours, And then as I got a little older and met some other musicians, the band started coming together and off it went. So I've been playing music really my whole life. And piano was around all the time, and so my dad just, I wasn't interested in formal lessons, and my sister was, so she's doing all that conservatory stuff, but I just wasn't interested in it. But my dad said, okay, well, I'm going to teach you chords, 1, 3, 5, and flatten the third for the minor. I'm like, okay, and I kind of got used to that. So I do a lot of keyboard playing as well. So, yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about leaving the forces.
Yep.
And then you do some outreach work, and then eventually you get involved in the business of human trafficking. How did that sort of evolve?
It's a really crazy story. My path to where I am now is just a crazy story. I figured the military, I don't know if I would do it for a whole career, but it was good. I was playing music for a living and, doing what we do. But when I was forced to get out, it really, at that point, I didn't go to any post-secondary school. So I went from high school into the military. So at the time in 94, it's like, okay, I don't have a job. I have our first child on its way. We were living on the base, so we had to leave. So we're like, I don't know what's going on or what I'm going to do. And make a long story a little short. I ended up working in a factory just because the opportunity was there and I had some connections and I was able to get in. So I worked in Cancoil, just down at Highway 15 for about a year. And then my brother-in-law, he was working as a chaplain with the Salvation Army in the prisons. And I was always intrigued by, I don't know why, but prison stuff. And just, and he said, look, I'm leaving. I think you'd be a great fit for this job. And it's really working one-on-one with inmates and their families and stuff. And I was desperate to get out of the factory. It was a culture shock being in there. So I took this job. And so I was working in 4 of the institutions here in Kingston. And it was that time, I was there for about 3 years, I realized how much I really like working with people. Like, I never been exposed to that side of just life, and really enjoyed working with the guys on the inside. And 3 years in, I was approached by a youth organization in town to run a teen drop-in center. And I thought, well, it'd be a good idea to maybe get to these people before they get inside, you know? So I accepted that position, and I worked with that organization for 6 years. And I really realized, you know what? Not only do I love working with people, but I really love working with young people. I ended up working a lot on the street with that organization, just doing a lot of outreach work. And so seeing a lot of just the fringe, you know, working in the trenches with some of these people. But what happened was I also discovered, wow, a lot of the inmates that I met inside are now out on parole. I'm seeing them downtown. I spent a lot of time with all ages. So I ended up leaving the youth organization just because a lot of my times with a 32-year-old guy, you know, trying to change his life and whatever. And I just couldn't justify my hours in a youth organization. So anyway, I continued working on the street, but then I went back to college. I wasn't making much money, and again, just had my high school. So I decided to go back to college, took a child and youth worker program. And at this point, I'm in my 30s, an old guy going back to college. That was another culture shock. And fast forward, I was in a class, I think it was a family violence class, and our teacher showed the movie Human Trafficking. Donald Sutherland, I think, was in it. And I sat there, and at this point, I'm still working on the street. And I had a good rapport with some sex workers, some former sex workers, and I thought I was pretty submersed in this. You know what? I understand what's going on. But when I was exposed to this movie, this idea of people selling other people for profit and just the exploitation on that kind of level, it just, I couldn't sleep at night. Like, it was just like, okay, is this really like happening? And the movie is more of an international perspective, but it got me thinking, like, is this happening in Kingston? Is this happening in Canada? Like, what's going on? So it took me a bit of time, but I started just asking those that I had a relationship with, you know, different agencies, like Interval House, the Shelter for Women, you know, the addictions agencies, and just saying, look, can I bend your ear a little bit? And, you know, do you know anything about human trafficking? If you do you see it in your agency or organization? And if you are, what are you doing about it? And within 5 minutes of the conversation, of me asking just these 3 questions, it was almost the same answer. It was like, well, we're pretty sure we're coming up against it, but we're not recognizing it for what it is. And we certainly don't have resources to deal with that complex victim. So I'm like, okay, well, that's, you know, that sucks on many levels. But it still wasn't a hard enough confirmation for me. So it wasn't until I had the opportunity to sit down with a police officer from Kingston Police Force. And he was kind of in between units at the time. And he was just coming out of the major crimes unit, undercover. And he was waiting to be placed somewhere. And I was introduced to him. And he was generous with his time, and he sat down with me, and I just said to him, look, same 3 questions, right? And he said, you know what? It is absolutely happening in this town. We have guys trafficking girls from Quebec, like on a rotation kind of thing. Probably every 3 months they're rolling in. And I'm like, okay. But he said, you know what? These guys are dangerous. You know, you can't just walk up to them and say, you know what? I don't like you in my town. Leave. But he was able to confirm for me that this is happening. But we, again, at that time, this is back in 2007, 2008, it wasn't in the major crimes unit's portfolio. Human trafficking wasn't guns, gangs, drugs, but no human trafficking. So a super long story, made it a little shorter. It kept me going in a direction of first discovering, like educating myself in this topic, and then bringing like-minded people around the table and just saying, okay, you know what can we do about that? So there was a group that was put together. We were called Alliance for Action. A lot of just education, awareness, holding events here in Kingston, bringing in some people who are way down the road in this topic and can bring some knowledge and expertise and just start again, bringing the awareness to the table. That lasted for 5 years. I kept doing my stuff on my own. I mean, I'm in a high school now. I work with Limestone District School Board as a high school counselor. I started doing presentations in my school, and it wasn't until it was probably 2016 maybe, I did a community event at Anguanada, and I just opened it up to the general public. I'm going to do a presentation, basically human trafficking 101 kind of thing. And I was expecting, I would have been thrilled if I had 30, 40 people show up. Kingston Whig got hold of it. They did an article, and we had well over 200 people show up. It was really overwhelming. We had Kingston Police, OPP, RCMP, agencies from around town, service providers, grandparents, parents, kids. I mean, you name it, it was represented. And when I'm doing this on my own, I always felt pretty vulnerable and like, what credentials do I carry, to be speaking on this? Like I don't have lived experience. I never consider myself an expert, but I just know what I know, and I'm just sharing. I'm doing what I can with what I have, and that's kind of my philosophy in life. Do what you can with what you have. So I don't know if you've been exposed to Lionhearts.
Yes.
Yeah. So Travis Blackmore, the director, good friend of mine, he was at that presentation, and he came up to me and said, "Man, like this is insane." I said, "I know." And he said, "Have you ever considered coming under the umbrella of anybody, an organization?" And at the time, I was looking at one other organization out of Cambridge, who I did a lot of work with, and they were a big support for me kind of moving forward. And he said, if you are, I think you would be a great fit for what we do with Lionhearts, and we would support you. We would help you raise money. We could write receipts for, tax deductions, stuff like that for people who donate, and we would just support you any way we can. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have to think twice about that. So, and it's local, right? It's right out of Kingston.
And it's a drummer talking to a drummer.
Yes, Travis is a drummer. Yes, a great drummer.
I had him on the podcast a while back.
Phenomenal guy, right? Like just visionary for sure. So that became official in 2016, I think, 17. And I said, okay, if this is what I'm going to do, just like I did with, a few of us did with Alliance for Action, I'm going to get some people around the table and get strategic and intentional. So now FAST 101, that's when FAST 101 was born, and that was 2017.
And what does FAST stand for?
FAST stands for Fighting Against Sex Trafficking. So again, we're only a small group, 5 or 6 of us, and we all have full-time jobs, so this is all, voluntary. And our mandate is really a lot like what Alliance for Action was, just education, awareness, filling in the gaps, where needed. A major thing that we do is first response bags. So a lot of people ask, like at end of presentations, like, what can I do? Right? Like, this is terrible. And it's not an easy question to answer because, it's a complex crime. Victims are extremely vulnerable, and it's hard to walk alongside these victims and survivors. So, do
we have a sense as to what the age group is that's impacted, like the victims that you see around town?
For sure. I mean, the average age of being lured into this is 12 to 15, so very, very young. And now we're making efforts to get into grades 6, 7, 8s right now in the school systems to speak to them and get this information to them. But the average age 12 to 15, and then it kind of goes up, right? I mean, if you look at stats, over 76% of victims are under the age of 25, and the pimps and traffickers are not that much older, generally speaking. So it's pretty young people who get pulled into this cesspool. And so, our mandate is really, we acknowledge his power. And once you hear it, you just can't ignore it anymore, And, the importance of getting this information to the young people for us is just so critical. And then looking at, again, okay, well, what do we do? Someone comes forward, we need to have the infrastructure set up. And, there's a human trafficking working group here in town with lots of agencies are represented around the table, as well as police, working on a protocol right now for Kingston, and just getting our heads together and trying to meet the needs that are there for these victims who are finally trying to escape this nightmare.
The podcast itself has been downloaded in a lot of different places. So it's not just Kingston we're talking to. I'm just curious to know if you've had any contact with other folks from other communities. You mentioned Cambridge a little while ago.
Yeah.
What sort of, have you shared information back and forth?
Yeah, for sure. There's a number of organizations. I mean, the bigger cities, I mean, Toronto, You Are Home is one that I connected with. Bridge North is another one. Durham region. I get emails and calls from different victim services offices, like from different areas. Durham is one. I get, not all the time, but a number of times, just for, finances. We raise money and we're able to offer support financially for victims, and we don't have a lot of hoops to jump through. If it's related to human trafficking, I just make a phone call or an email, and we can get that money. So a lot of times those service providers will reach out, knowing, what, Fast 101 is there, and it doesn't have to be Kingston. I mean, this crime travels too, right? Yeah. So a lot of times, victims have come through Kingston. They may not, have come out, exited, their situation in Kingston, but many times they've been touched, by Kingston. It has been kind of on the course for them, and it doesn't matter. So, but yeah, these other agencies, there's lots of training online, and a lot of times you see the same, oh, hey, there's so-and-so, and they're, they're pretty active. So, we're always just, email or text or a phone call away. And, if I've got questions, there's people in Ottawa too that I'm tapped into that I, call up quite often saying, look, here's the situation. Can you help? Or do you have resources available? And it's a really good partnership that way.
Now, is your position at Ernesttown Secondary, is that something that's related to human trafficking, or is it just a more general approach to counseling?
Yeah, it's so adolescent care worker is my title, which is basically counselor. I don't deal with any of the academic side unless they have issues with their teacher. Then I might step in. But it's really sorting out life, just getting them through their adolescent years in one piece, so that could be anything, and nothing's off the table. So, and then given that, I've kind of just brought in this whole human trafficking piece. And again, like even today, had another conversation with a kid, who wants to go to Nova Scotia. And I'm like, why? Well, I met a guy online, and it's like, okay, we need to talk. And they're like, oh my goodness. I'm like, yeah. So, I just because of where I've been over the last number of years and the work that I've done in regards to trafficking, it's just a natural fit, and Limestone District School Board this year particularly has really stepped up their game in the education piece, and I think there's funding for that. So now we've got it in the grade 9 curriculum, in the health curriculum, where they actually take a couple of days to teach about this issue, this topic. So it's just been a really good fit for me, and very easy to do that, and just educating all the other people doing my job in the other high schools as well. So every school in our school board, for sure, somebody in every school has been trained on this stuff.
Now, very important topic, and when I was talking with someone else, your name came up, but your name came up as a musician. So when I started looking online for information about you, I saw this piece, and I'm reading through this stuff, and that's why I wanted to integrate this into our conversation today, because it is an important topic. But as it relates to music, how does music fit into your daily life now? I mean, given the work you do in the school and given the work you do with FAST.
Being a drummer, that was always my first love musically. But I started doing a bit of writing years ago. And when I was doing that project, I brought in some guys that, I knew could play. And we ended up putting a band together. And in that band, I started doing the vocals and just rhythm guitar and a little percussion on the side. So that band was together, maybe 15 years or so, and did a few recordings, and then it just kind of folded over time, and I really missed drumming. I'm thinking, man, I really want to get back into drumming. So there's a couple opportunities in town. We didn't do a lot of clubs when in this band. We did more out of town stuff. So I wasn't really familiar with the club scene or the bar scene as a musician. But getting back into drumming was my way in, and I connected with a couple guys in town, and just sat in with them, and then it just kind of mushroomed from there. But as I'm playing a lot of drumming again, I'm like, man, I miss singing. Like I miss this. I just can't have it all, right? So I thought, you know what? I'm going to learn a bunch of cover tunes that I've always loved growing up and, listening to and on my list and playlists and stuff, and see where I can go with this and see if I can start just gigging around town. And I have been for the last, 4 or 5 years anyway.
See, that was my next question. Yeah. Is playing cover tunes.
Yes.
Who do you like to play?
Oh, I am an 80s guy. All the classic rock, 80s, 90s, all that stuff. Tom Petty, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, U2, Supertramp, Eddie Money. It's just the list goes on.
Goes on and on.
Yeah,
and
the
on.
Beatles, all that stuff.
So when you're going to a bar, you tend to perform, at least based upon what I've seen in terms of videos that are online.
Yeah.
It's just you and your instrument.
Yes, just myself, guitar, and singing. Yeah.
When you're in a bar playing, you're playing some of your songs, some of their songs, or other people's songs?
Yeah.
Mixture of both?
Yeah, well, yeah, with the band, we did mostly originals through the years. But I didn't find a lot of them translated well to just a solo acoustic guy, There's a few that I'll pull out, and it's just so long ago. Like it was hard pulling those ones out again, And then there's a couple of local musicians who just really encouraged me. Like, are you writing? And I'm like, oh man. Anytime I wrote anything is in collaboration with the guys, right? The band. Yeah. And I've never really worked hard at, I'm just going to do something on my own. But, they kept at me and said, you know what? Yeah, why not? So I started over COVID and, I had a number of songs. Yeah, you know what? I think I can take these in the studio. And I really wasn't going to record them. But Bon Evans, he just twisted my arm and said, you got to get in and do this stuff, right? So, so I did. So last April, May, approached Long Shot Studios with Matt Bates, and again, good musician friend of mine, and played with us for a while. He had me come into the studio, work through the summer, and then October had the EP released, and and away we go. So I will bring some of those songs into my sets.
When you're writing songs, what comes first, music or the lyrics?
That's see. I would never consider myself a songwriter. Like when someone says, "Okay, I need you to write a song by like 2 weeks from now," I'm like, I can't do that under pressure. I can't. I'm a drummer. That's when I remind everybody I'm a drummer, percussionist. But when they come, they come. And normally, I'll just sitting on an instrument with this piano or guitar, and I'll just fall on something, even if it's just 2 chords, and it's like, oh, and then some melody may come to mind, and I'll just grab the phone, hit the little video, and get this documented somehow. And I already have about 4 or 5 to go back to already to start thinking about new songs. And I'll leave it for a bit and come back, and it's the lyrics that they get me every time. It's like, what do I have to say?
Yeah.
And that's where that's where I really have to work hard and force myself. Okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to just throw some thoughts on paper. And so normally it's the music idea, and then, okay, I'm just going to write down some thoughts, and then I try and just blend them together, and then it kind of just takes off from there. And normally it's not much effort. It just seems to happen, which is great. It's not forced.
Have you heard the story of how Randy Bachman came up with the American Woman introduction?
Was that during a sound check?
His strings broke on his guitar, and he was replacing the strings.
Okay.
And then he was playing with the strings to make sure everything was going okay. And,
right.
He developed that riff. And he kept playing it over and over until the band came back up on stage.
Right.
And told Burton Cummings to start singing something.
Yeah.
And that's how, you never know, and stuff like that's going to come.
It's crazy. That's how it works.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know what kind of feedback you get from people who listen to you. I know that when I listen to music, and this is just my personal opinion, I like the feel of a song, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't catch the lyrics as they go flying by.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the lyrics are really important, and I really get into the lyrics. But it's the overall feel of the music in the song that gets me, and something I'll play over and over again if it's something I like.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of feedback you get from your stuff. Or you haven't played much of your own stuff lately, is what you're saying,
just
right?
starting. Yeah. In fact, I'm putting a band together right now just to maybe do a couple gigs and with a band and doing all the original stuff, just seeing how that feels live with a band kind of, approach. But I would never say, especially on guitar, like I am a pretty simple player. And I think some of my favorite musicians probably aren't the most technically, out there.
Yeah.
But they're very passionate about what they do. They can play 3 chords and just, wow, like there's some heart and soul there. And for me anyway, that I don't care if it's a drummer, they're like a guitar player, a singer, like when it's oozing passion and it's coming from that's a deep place that's coming from. It has a way of finding into the person on the receiving end of it. you know.
Before we started to record, we talked a little bit about you listening to one of the other podcasts involving Savannah Shea.
Yeah.
And I saw her perform at the Isabel Bader Center, and she had a band with her. And I remarked when I was talking to her that the band seemed to have the opportunity to let go, to do their thing as part of her song. And she said that when she writes the music, she writes very basic, simple stuff and says, okay, guys, just do what you want to do, sort of thing.
Well, I think that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's Sting, but the idea was like, you know what? I look good when they look good. Yeah. I let them go. Let them play.
Yeah.
You know what? That reflects on me too. You know, like, so always surround yourself with better musicians than you are.
That's right.
You know, and I try and keep that, you know, at the forefront of my thoughts when I'm looking around who's around me. But it's true, you know, you let them do their thing, you know, let the music breathe. It has life, you know, and it's amazing to see what happens. But I think the soul can speak to the soul. And I think when it's coming from that place, it reaches that place. And that person on the receiving end recognizes, hey, I feel that, you know, and that's the beauty of music when it's coming from that spot.
Let's talk about the EP for a second.
Sure.
It's called Long Way Home.
Yep.
6 songs.
Yep.
And I listened to all of the songs on the EP, and I hear this rooster in my head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Over and over again. But it's a chorus thing.
Yeah.
And most of the songs have a great chorus, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, something that you catch on to. And that's the magic of a lot of songs is the chorus coming back and keeping that song in your head for a longer period of time.
Yeah. Where
was it recorded?
Longshot Studios.
Which is where?
It's just the West End.
In Kingston?
In Kingston, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Matt Bates, that's his business. Great musician, great friend, great engineer. Yeah.
They're all your songs?
Yes. Yeah.
Written and recorded?
Yeah.
Performed, rather. Excuse me. A couple of things. Sax solo in Coming Home. Who plays the sax?
John Bunny Stewart did the sax solo.
Is that the fellow that plays with Georgette Fry?
I think, and I think I've seen him also. He plays with a lot of people, but Emily Fennell, Miss Emily, I think I've seen him play. Super guy. And also Ian Kamoji, he also played sax. He's kind of on the tail end of that song. Mm-hmm. He didn't do the main sax solo, but he kind of noodles at the end of that song. And then I think it's the first track, Carry On. He also does some sax work. Ian does in that as well. But,
that has a great chorus as well.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
It's good. How would you categorize the kind of music that you write and perform?
Oh, I don't know. I mean...
I ask this question of almost every musician I talk to, and I get the same answer.
I don't know. Yeah, well, it's funny. I can't remember what friend it was, but he listened to it and said, yeah, you know what? It kind of took me back to my 80s rock days, you know? And I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, hey, I like the 80s kind of rock stuff, and I don't know if that's because, it is melodic, like the melodies are there. The choruses are, I don't know, it's melody, right? And it's, it's kind of, the chorus is kind of hit another level, which may, I don't know, reflect to the 80s kind of music. I don't know, but I don't know how to categorize it. I mean, it's, is what it is. I don't know. And I mean, it's not country, right? It
not
ain't
that there's anything wrong with country.
No, nothing wrong with country.
No, the one thing I was curious about when it comes to the two passions that you have, right, that we've been talking about during the program today, do you feel you're making progress?
Like in the human trafficking field, like just making progress?
As well as music.
And music.
Or bringing awareness.
Awareness, yeah. I would say absolutely. I mean, as far as the trafficking side of things, I'll tell you, when I started this in 2007, there's nothing. Police, it wasn't even on the police's radar, and so to see where we've come, now it's in grade 9 curriculum, hard pressed to find an agency in town who hasn't been exposed to this and done some training. Like, we've leaps and bounds, which is great. Musically, gosh, I haven't recorded since 2000. So the fact that I've, my arm has been twisted a bit and I've gotten in the studio and I have this EP out and I've already got a few others kind of brewing. Like it's moving. I mean, my goal was really a few years back was just, I want to learn some covers and start playing around town a bit, and just enjoying that community of people. And man, like last summer, all summer, every weekend, 3-4 gigs a weekend, it was just nonstop. And man, I couldn't be more grateful and happy about that, So I think that is certainly moving forward, and met some incredible people along the way too, which is phenomenal.
That's one thing. I've lived in this town quite a while, and there are an awful lot of talented musicians, singers, songwriters, players in this community.
Oh, it's saturated with it. It's incredible. Yeah.
Let's go down the road 10 years. Where are you with these two passions? Or what would you like to see happen?
Well, I would like to see human trafficking no longer an issue. But if nothing else, 10 years from now, I'd love to see multiple safe houses that are up and running and are sustainable. It's a priority. Those who find themselves in those situations have recognized that it's safe to come out. You can exit, and there's full supports, and there'll be testimony from those who are survivors who can testify to the fact that, yep, the system works. It's not evil. They're not the bad guy.
Yeah.
You can heal from this and actually regain what you've lost and have a life. Musically, I don't know. I just hope I'm doing this till the day I drop. Music will never. It's just been part of my life. Will always be part of my life. I don't know, 10 years from now, I'll probably be looking at retirement, and maybe I'll be going to, retirement homes and playing for them. I don't know. My music will be relevant. Who knows? But it will still be happening in some form. Absolutely. So I don't know. We'll see. We bought an RV, so maybe we'll hit the road and let the music pay for the gas. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Given the price of gas.
Oh, yeah.
And RVs.
Yeah, for sure.
Contact information as you think about human trafficking and versus the music, if somebody wants to get a hold of you.
Yeah, well, on the human trafficking side of things, we do have a Facebook page. Now, I can't remember. It's facebook.com/whatever. But the easiest way to find that is just Google it or go on Facebook, search for it, Fighting Against Sex Trafficking 101, like Kingston. It pops up. You can tap into that, keep up to date on what we're doing. You can follow it there. You can message us directly from there. And, we're on it every day. At least I am on it every day. And a lot of people reach out that way. We do have an Instagram as well. Again, you have to search for it. I don't run that side of it. Somebody else does.
Yeah. But we have the Facebook page up.
Yeah, for sure. Music, I have a Facebook music page, and that's just facebook.com/my last name, Vander Horden, so VANDERHORDEN. I keep all my information up there, and people can reach out to me that way as well. But that tends to be the easiest way and the most accessible way.
What I'll do is I'll put this on the liner notes for the episode when it goes.
Oh, great.
When it's published, so people can find you. One last question. Didge?
Yeah, okay. I'm also a biker. So...
One of those.
Yeah, that's my therapy. Music and biking on my motorcycle. So, a lot of bikers have road names. And Didge is short for didgeridoo.
Okay.
Australian instrument, and I do play one. It doesn't come out very often. I just drive my family crazy by playing at home, and it's not the most, pleasant sounding thing. But that people found that out, and it just kind of, Didge, okay, and it kind of stuck. And then I thought, okay, some of the groups that I was riding with, I'm not riding with anymore. I'm just out on my own, doing my own thing. But somehow, it must have been on my socials or something. And when I started playing in town, guys I'm playing with, they'll introduce me as Doug Didge. And I'm like, okay. Okay. And it just kind of stuck. And yeah, so.
It's shorter than Vander
It is. Yeah. And that's probably half the reason why I just don't care. It's okay, whatever. So anyway, but yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and chat. And I've enjoyed our conversation, and all the best to you going forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. Thanks.
My guest on today's podcast was Doug Vander Horden. If you'd like more information, I'll include the social media links in the show notes on our website. For those of you listening today, thank you, and we'll talk soon.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast at gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.